All right, welcome back. This is the next part of the Age of Absolutism unit. We're just going to be focusing on France with this one. The ones we covered up to this point is Spain and England, and we had an overview of what Age of Absolutism is, this whole idea of the quest for absolute power. And we've gone over concepts like divine right of kings. And before all that, we covered something called the Commercial Revolution. It's been a while since we've been here, coming back from spring break. So anyways, just diving back into it. So hopefully this isn't too long, but again, we're just going to be focusing on France for this one here. Now, just really quickly, I do need to say this again, but this is one of the more fun areas of history to look into. The monarchistic intrigues, and how do I put it? It's just like one gigantic soap opera. Like there's so many shows and there's so many books, series, sitcoms done on this time period because you don't really need to write much about it. You don't need to think about certain things because it's all right there for you. It's in the history. The intrigues are right there. The religious turmoil is right there. It's makes it easy to kind of come up with a very engaging, if not just crazy and messed up story to put on that people would be entertained by today. Although you look at some things going on today and you wonder if it's really changed much. But anyways, I'm digressing a little bit. Moving on with the stuff on France. Now, if you remember, as we talked about England last time, we focused a lot on the idea that there were huge tensions between both Protestants and Catholics. England was a Catholic country, and then all of a sudden Henry had a falling out with the Pope, decided to form his own church in order to divorce his wife, and yada, yada, yada. You have Protestants versus Catholics in England, and it caused problems a lot of problems for a good 150, almost 200 years after that, and arguably even into today, but today isn't as bad, honestly. Definitely not like what it used to be. And the same thing for France. France was also going through a lot of these struggles and things that were going on at the time. So first thing I've put up here is that, French were mostly Catholic, but anybody that converted over to a different Christian religion was known as a Huguenot. I think that's how you pronounce it. If you speak French, you can correct me. Of course, if you're just reading that in English, it's just like Huguenots. Anyways, they're predominantly of the Calvinist thinking, if you remember back to our unit on the Reformation. From my understanding, I'm not sure all of them were Calvinists. I think all French Protestants were just grouped together in that. Anyway, they could be wrong there, but that's my understanding of it right now. But there's a lot of tensions, and there's a lot of falling outs, there's a lot of arguments, there's some wars here and there. Some civil wars, civil strifes. But things seemed like they were kind of going okay until, the Catholic king, especially his Catholic mother, decided that Protestants just weren't needed anymore. There's a lot that goes into this. I can get into the nitty-gritty of this one. But just for you guys to know, this is the basic idea that the French king signed off on the murder of a lot of prominent prominent Protestant leaders in France when they were all gathered together in Paris to celebrate the marriage of actually a Protestant to the king's own sister. Yeah, family problems there much. So some very prominent people were killed, and this just kind of it turned the valve on just all of Catholics in France just saying, okay, it's time to kill all the Protestants. And I can't remember how long it went on. It wasn't just one day. It started on one day, St. Bartholomew's Day, but I think the murders went on a month, 2 months or so, stretched all over France, and they estimate that 70,000 Protestants were killed in these, just all this conflict. I shouldn't really say conflict, all these massacres. Just a bad time, and it really, really hit the Protestant factions pretty hard. They lost most of their leaders, and the Catholics pretty much regained the Catholic Church and families, noble families following the Catholic religion, especially the royal family. They remain dominant in France. This is how Catholicism remains dominant in France. So, by the way, A bit of a side note and kind of a connection to, say, over here in the Americas. Mostly Canada, by the way, but even a little bit the United States or future United States. This is 200 years before the United States even comes around. But a lot of French Protestants over time realize we're not welcome here. So where do we go? To a place where we can find religious freedom, the Americas. So anyways, just a little bit of a side note there. So now with the Catholic Church firmly in control of just how things are working, getting into how there's actually even conflict between the Catholics themselves. So we're getting into the reign in the 1600s of a guy named King Louis XIII. And if you see the name Cardinal Richelieu there and you're wondering how that sounds familiar, if you've ever seen any Three Musketeer movies anywhere, Cardinal Richelieu is always the bad guy. Pretty much there was a bit, with this concept of divine right of kings, and then the idea that the Pope should have control over everything, France became the target point of this controversy. Louis XIII claimed divine right, meaning that he didn't think that the Pope should ever be able to tell him what to do, that he was an equal with the Pope in a way, that he was only answerable to God. Cardinal Richelieu, who essentially is there on the Pope's behalf, does not think that way, and there's a huge power struggle between the two. Louis XIII looks at Richelieu as more of just an advisor, and that's all the role he should play. Louis XIII can make his own decisions, but Cardinal Richelieu is thinking that, no, I'm really the person who controls what goes on here in France. I'm the spokesperson for the Catholic Church. I know what the Pope's will is, and so therefore I should be the leader. So there's a lot of tension there. And just to explain a bit the idea of the Three Musketeers, that story, if you've seen the movies, some of the more modern ones get way off base, but anyways, you have the Musketeers, who are the guardians of the king, and the main bad guy is always Cardinal Richelieu, even though they're also fighting like foreign powers like the English and stuff like that during that time. And what it's doing is it's focusing on this idea of king's power and prestige versus the cardinals or the church's power and prestige, and who should have more power there in France. Anyways, that probably could have just really wrecked France pretty good right there and drawn it into a civil war, like an internal Catholic civil war. King versus church type thing. But they did have mutual goals. The mutual goals are they did want to eliminate the Protestants, the Huguenots. And they both realized that France was under threat by the Habsburgs. Now, we have already talked about the Habsburgs. Charles V being the number one Habsburg. This incredibly powerful king during the early 1500s, and then all of his descendants. And his Habsburg relatives and descendants being on the thrones of almost one-third, almost half of Europe during this time, the 1600s. Now you have what's called the Bourbon family here. A lot of Louis XIII, XIVth, XVth, XVIth. They're feeling a bit surrounded. I'll show you a map, not in this segment, at least I don't think in this segment, but later on we're just, France feels surrounded, so they realize we can't deal with internal struggles. We need to be fighting against people around, or we need to make sure that we can diminish Habsburg power so they don't threaten us or overtake us and make France a Habsburg nation as well. Even Catholic Cardinal Richelieu didn't want that to happen because he had a sense of French patriotism to him as well, and that was a connecting point between these two leaders, between Louis XIII and Cardinal Richelieu. By the way, the picture at the very bottom is a painting of a famed siege of the city of Rochelle, one of the last major holdouts of the Protestants or Huguenots in France. It lasted for years, but Cardinal Richelieu basically just, he trounced him pretty good. Anyways, that brings us into Louis XIII's son, Louis XIV. Now, Louis XIV grew up watching his dad have his problems with dealing with Cardinal Richelieu and just having, how do you get absolute power? There's a little bit more to this than what I'm getting at too, but just to stick with the ideas of this quest for absolute rule and divine right and how can I be the most powerful guy ever, Louis XIV, sorry, I'll bring this up. Louis XIV, he does it. He does it in every way except for just getting what he really wanted at the end, actual control of everything. He tries. He launches what is considered basically a world war to gain control of everything. But it's not necessarily the war, which is called the War of Spanish Succession. I'll talk about that in another segment, by the way, when we get into the wars of absolutism. It's not really that he is so famous for. He's famous for essentially gaining absolute power by distracting everybody else. I'll go into that in a second. But simply put, let's put it this way. He made himself an icon. If you're looking at that picture right now of Louis XIV and you're just thinking that he just seems a little bit too prissy or something like that, to be a king, that's intentional. What he does is he sets, I'm forgetting the word right now, standards for everybody to follow. What's cool at the time. Like if you're looking at this, you notice he's wearing tights, high heels. He's got a perm. It's actually a wig, long hair, but a perm, and a very short skirt on. If you're thinking this is more known for, say, like the more of a feminine thing, over time, well, here's a bit of a lesson where even a lot of things that are considered more feminine were actually started by men. In this case, Louis XIV. He did stuff that was a bit shocking, look at my legs type thing. By the way, he did that with the high heels, the stockings, and the short skirt because legs were considered to be quite sexy, and the high heels helped define it. Just give you a little bit there. But he's doing this to be shocking. Once people are like, oh, well, I'm going to be a rebel like that too. Once people start copying him, he has them. And he realizes that if he can do things to get people to copy him, then in a way he has them. You can make a bit of a segue here. I'm going to look at, say, famous people today, pop stars. They're always trying to do things to just push the mold a little bit, get people to copy them. Because if they know they can get a fan base to do that, then those people, they'll always be looking up their stuff, looking up their videos on YouTube, buying their stuff in the stores. If they can get that fan base, if they can do those things to be shocking and be well known, then they can do that. And that's nothing new. Louis the 14th, you could say, really started the modern idea of being a pop star, if you want to put it that way. Anyways, but I would say, no, I don't know if many people have been able to reach the height or do as well as he did, him being one of the first. So, this next part I just brought up just talks about through arranged marriages, wars, treaties, and high taxes. He is trying to gain just this absolute rule. I'm not going to go too much into that stuff. That's just, get that down in your notes, yes. But essentially it's just going over all these ways he was trying to gain absolute power over everybody else. And I'll talk about wars of Spanish succession actually later when I go over the wars of absolutism. But this is really this is the big thing right here. If you've ever heard of the Palace of Versailles, the Palace of Versailles is this palace. Well, it's in France today. You can go to it. It's one of those places that's on my bucket list to go to. And I've not been to France yet. I've been to Europe, but I just went through Paris on a layover, and I probably should have stayed around a little bit longer. But anyways, you're seeing a painting of the Palace of Versailles, but this is a place that Louis built up to essentially get all of his potential enemies and friends together in one spot. And how does he lure him in? Essentially pleasure. So, talk about here how he's keeping an eye on them. But how do I put this? Well, I put this pretty well where it's in the bottom here where it says Versailles also served as a demonstration of wealth, power, and glory. It's this amazing palace. All the palaces built in Europe after this were a way of trying to copy Versailles. It's just a beautiful place. I'll be showing you pictures of what it looks like more later here in a second. But I need to explain here just what the big deal is about this. Versailles is a place that, yes, was supposed to show this grandeur of what an absolute ruler should really have. This is the type of place they would live in. But then he built it so it could house not just the nobility of France, but it could house the nobility of a lot of other European nations as well. Like you had Spanish nobility, Italian nobility, German nobility, English nobility, even some Russian nobles coming to Versailles to live to just take part of what's known as Versailles life. Now, what is Versailles life? It is just straight up pleasure life. And this was intentional. This wasn't the idea hey, let's have a party all day. I need to back up there. This wasn't in the mind of Louis. He's not thinking, hey, this is all about party all day and this is what being an absolute ruler is. No, he's thinking, hey, I'm going to make this a party all day place so that they're so addicted to these pleasures, essentially dancing, music, sex, uh, everything, food, that goes on the pleasure pile, that they're so addicted to it that they won't be able to think of anything else. All they can think about is what they want to do the next day. You know, what's the new type of food that's going to come out? You know, what's the new, and these were happening a lot, what's the new adulterous affair that's going on between whatever noble families? You know, what's the new dance that someone's coming up with? What's the new song that's going to be played by the orchestra in the ballroom? And it was dawn to dusk. It was just all day. You could do whatever you, just pleasure, pleasure, pleasure. And he spent a fortune into this. Of course, this stuff was expensive. Louis XIV spent a fortune into this. Of course, it was expensive. And it worked. It worked amazingly well. He was able to keep a lot of people out. Now, it didn't catch everybody. There was a lot of nobles, especially some French nobles, are like, I'm not going to get trapped by this. But it was a great way to just kind of keep them all diverted. So in that way, Louis was able to become an absolute ruler because no one challenged him. He became an absolute ruler of France with really nobody challenging him because they were too busy partying, having fun. And is there a lesson there for today? Most definitely. Now, if you want to look at your own life, just a little bit of a self-reflection, you know, how much time is spent seeking out the next trivial entertainment? I don't know. I myself, I like my video games, but I definitely know when I've played too much. You know, I like going out and having fun, like spending time with my family, doing fun things, watching a movie, something like that. But at what point, you know, are you realizing that you're not paying attention to important things going on in life around you, and you're just putting off important decisions until later because you just don't want to deal with it? We actually do have that today, to where if we have so much put in front of us entertainment-wise that a lot of us, as long as we're getting that, we don't really care about what's going on in the world around us. Anyways, I'm not going to go down that road too much more, but it is something to think about. That is most definitely in place today, this Versailles type of distractions. Anyways, so Louis XIV pretty much gains absolute rule through that way, and infects other countries as well. Because, of course, when English nobles come there, then they go back to England and say, look what I learned here, and let's do this here, and I'm going to build a palace here as well. And all of a sudden, everybody around Europe is just getting into this very decadent life. So, anyways, just some pictures of Versailles. Give you a lot more just kind of the grandeur of this place. Just kind of look at the like they still keep up. Those are modern pictures, by the way. They, you know, for tourist appeal, they still upkeep some of the gardens, but they don't upkeep everything that it used to be upkept. It's just too expensive. But those grounds are pretty amazing. By the way, if you're wondering why every house has a yard today, it's because here in the United States, we like this idea that, you know, each individual is kind of the king of his own home. You know, we can live like kings if we want to. Everybody should be able to have that opportunity if you work hard enough. And so one of the ways to do that, to kind of show off, is, hey, look what a nice lawn I have. It kind of looks like a Versailles lawn, doesn't it? Anyways, not saying that we're living a Versailles life, say, in every home. But this was actually the start of that. It's like, that is so awesome. It's so nice to walk through a garden like that. It's so nice to have just a pretty picturesque lawn, or flowers and things like that. And so we like to think that we can do that here as well. So, and more power to the people that put their hard work into that. So, but if you want to know where that started, this is where it starts. So now, inside of Versailles, like, that is immaculate. And by the way, when you see areas that are gold, a lot of times it is pure gold. And crystal chandeliers, things like that. The picture on the bottom right is what's known as the Hall of Mirrors, which is like, whenever you go to Versailles, people always talk about the Hall of Mirrors. I've never been there myself. I would love to go in there, but everybody keeps talking about how amazing it is. The people I know have gone there, and the things I've read up on it. You see just a regular bedroom in there and stuff like that. Oh, one thing I forgot to explain was, if you're ever into like watching things like Scooby-Doo, or kind of those horror flicks, I shouldn't say horror flicks, mystery type of stuff, Clue or whatever. I know I'm dating myself right now. But this is the palace that gives rise to the idea of, like, you know, the painting where you have the guy looking at you, the eyes of the painting or the eyes of someone looking at you. This is where it happened. Like Louis actually had spies all throughout this palace to watch people. And so when someone get into an adulterous affair, he kept track of that. He kept track of all the stuff that would happen. So that if anybody were to kind of like wake up and say, oh no, Louis, we don't like what you're doing, you'd say, I actually know that you were sleeping with this person, or you were doing this with this person, or you did this over here. Do you really want that to get out? And he would blackmail people into submission if he had to. If the pleasure wasn't working forever, then he'd had blackmail on the back end of it as well. Like he purposely had secret passageways built into this palace so that, a husband could leave his wife for the night to go be with his mistress. Like, this is, I hope you're viewing this as a very bad thing. I definitely myself would view that as a very immoral and bad thing, something that's not good to have in society. And Louis used this to keep control and gain absolute rule. Okay, anyways, moving on. Oh, not moving on. That was the end. That's right. We'll save this for another day. And I'm realizing this video went a little bit longer than I meant it to. I thought it would be a little bit shorter. But this is just the part on France. So I hope you enjoyed this a little bit. If you want to learn more, look it up. This is interesting stuff. Anyways, we will see you guys in the next one.